The snow fell softly that night, the kind that muffles sound and makes the world feel smaller, quieter, like the whole city had tucked itself in under a white blanket. Inside the empty restaurant, the man sat alone at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug that held nothing but cold air. He hadn't turned on the heat. There was no point. The gas had been shut off 2 days ago, and the electricity would follow soon. He didn't mind the cold so much. It matched how he felt inside, hollow, numb, like a room stripped bare after a move. For 15 years, this place had been his life. He'd opened it with his mother's old recipes, her handwritten notes tucked in a drawer behind the register. He'd scrubbed the floors himself, greeted every customer by name, stayed late to fix the oven when it sputtered. People called it a neighborhood gem. Warm lighting, red-checkered tablecloths, the smell of garlic and rosemary hanging in the air like a promise. He'd watched kids grow up eating his spaghetti, couples get engaged over tiramisu, widows come in just to sit and remember. He'd poured everything into these walls, his savings, his time, his pride. And now it was all gone. The bank had called that morning. Final notice. The loan was in default. They'd be listing the property for sale within the week. He'd nodded, said thank you, hung up. No shouting, no tears. He was too tired for either. At 52, he'd thought he'd built something that would last. Instead, he was packing cardboard boxes in the dark, salvaging what he could. A few plates, his mother's rolling pin, a framed photo of the two of them from the grand opening. He still had the tiny apartment upstairs, the one above the kitchen. It wasn't much, just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a closet that doubled as a kitchenette. But it was his. For now. The building was part of the collateral, so technically he shouldn't be living there. But no one had come to evict him yet, and he figured he'd stay until they did. What else was there to do? He stood and walked to the window, peering through the frost-rimmed glass. The street was nearly empty. A few cars passed, headlights cutting through the snow. Then he saw them. Near the alley dumpster, huddled against the brick wall, were two figures wrapped in what looked like a thin, moving blanket. One was tall, shoulders slumped, head bowed. The other was small, very small, curled into the man's side like a question mark. Even from this distance, he could tell the child was shivering. They weren't moving, just sitting there as if they'd run out of places to go. His first thought was to call the shelter. But he knew the shelters were full this time of year. He'd driven past them before, lines out the door, people turned away in the cold. His second thought was to mind his own business. He had enough problems. He couldn't save the world. He could barely save himself. But then the little one lifted her head just slightly and looked toward the restaurant window. He couldn't see her eyes clearly, but he felt it, like she was looking right at him. And in that moment, something cracked open inside his chest. He remembered his own daughter years ago, lost in a department store for 10 terrifying minutes. The panic, the relief, the way he'd held her so tight afterward, she'd giggled and said, "Daddy, you're squishing me." That girl out there, she had no one to squish her, no one to make her laugh. Before he could talk himself out of it, he grabbed his coat, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a slap. He walked slowly toward the alley, hands in his pockets, not wanting to scare them. When he was a few feet away, he stopped. "Hey," he said, voice softer than he intended. "It's freezing out here." The man looked up, wary, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion lining his face. He held the blanket tighter around the child. "We're not causing trouble," he said quickly. "Just resting a minute." "I know," the restaurant owner said. "I've got an empty room upstairs. Above the restaurant. It's not much, but it's dry. And warm. You can stay tonight. No charge." The man stared at him, disbelief warring with suspicion. "Why would you do that?" The owner shrugged. "Because it's cold, and because I've been lucky enough to have a roof over my head most of my life. Tonight maybe I can share it." The man hesitated, then glanced down at the little girl. She was watching the restaurant owner now, eyes wide and dark, one hand clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. She didn't speak, but she gave the tiniest nod. "Okay," the man said finally, "just for tonight." They followed him inside through the back door. The kitchen was dark, silent, the stainless steel counters gleaming faintly in the moonlight filtering through the high windows. The man carried the girl in his arms, though she looked light enough to float away. She kept her face buried in his shoulder. He led them up the narrow staircase to the apartment. It was small, yes, but clean. A single bed, a dresser, a hot plate in the corner, a space heater humming softly. He plugged in an extra heater he kept for emergencies and pointed to the bathroom. You can use the shower if you want. There are clean towels in the cabinet. The man shook his head. We're fine. Don't want to be a bother. You're not, the owner said. There's water in the kettle. Make yourself tea if you like. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. He turned to leave, but the little girl spoke for the first time. Mister? He turned back. She was sitting on the edge of the bed now, rabbit in her lap. Yeah? Is your restaurant closed? He nodded. Yeah, it is. Why, just business didn't work out. She thought about that for a moment. My daddy says sometimes things break, but you can fix them if you try. He almost smiled. Your daddy's a smart man. She looked at her father, then back at him. He is. He left them to settle in and went back downstairs. He didn't sleep. He sat at the same corner table, listening to the faint sounds from above, the creak of the bed, the murmur of quiet voices, the soft thump of the space heater cycling on. It felt strange having people in the building again, not customers, not staff, just people, real, tired human people who needed a place to rest. In the morning he woke to the smell of coffee. Not his coffee. He hadn't had any in weeks. He followed the scent to the kitchen. The man was standing by the hot plate holding a steaming mug. I found some instant in the cupboard, he said, a little sheepish. Hope that's okay. Made a cup for you too. The restaurant owner took the mug. It was weak, bitter, but hot. Thanks. The little girl sat at the prep counter, swinging her legs, still in the same clothes from last night, but looking a little less ghostly in the daylight. She smiled when she saw him. Good morning, she said politely. Good morning, he replied. Sleep okay? She nodded. Your bed is soft, he chuckled. Glad to hear it. The man set down his mug. We should go. Don't want to overstay. The restaurant owner hesitated. Outside the snow had stopped, but the temperature hadn't risen. The sidewalks were slick, the wind sharp. He looked at the girl's thin jacket, her worn sneakers with holes near the toes. How about one more night? He said. Just until the weather clears. I've got plenty of room. The man looked surprised, then grateful. You sure? Sure. That day the man didn't just sit around. He swept the dining room floor even though it didn't need it. He wiped down the bar, organized the empty wine racks, fixed the wobbly leg on a chair with a folded napkin. He worked quietly, efficiently like he was used to fixing things. The girl stayed close, coloring on scrap paper with a stubby pencil the restaurant owner found in a drawer. She drew pictures of rabbits, snowmen, and a big building with smoke coming out of the chimney. His restaurant, he realized. By evening, something had shifted. It wasn't just shelter anymore. It felt like the beginning of something. Fragile, uncertain, but real. That night, as he lay in his cot in the storage room, he'd given them the apartment. He thought about how strange life was. He'd lost everything, his business, his security, his sense of purpose. And yet here he was, offering his last safe space to strangers. And instead of feeling emptier, he felt less alone. He didn't know their names, didn't know their story beyond what he'd seen. But he knew this, they needed help. And maybe, just maybe, helping them would help him too. Outside, the city slept under its blanket of snow. Inside, three people who had nothing in common except kindness and cold found a little warmth together. And for the first time in months, the restaurant didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like it was still breathing. The second night passed much like the first. Quiet, careful, full of unspoken questions. By morning, the man had already swept the entire dining area again, this time with more purpose, as if proving he wasn't just taking. He was giving back. The little girl sat at a booth near the window, sunlight catching in her tangled hair as she carefully colored a drawing of the restaurant with a bright red door and smoke curling from an imaginary chimney. She'd added 3 stick figures underneath, one tall, one small, and one in the middle with a chef's hat. The restaurant owner watched her from the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand. He still hadn't asked their names. It felt too formal, too much like paperwork, and right now they weren't strangers filling out a form. They were just people sharing space in a broken place that somehow still held warmth. You're good at that, he said, nodding at her drawing. She looked up, shy but pleased. I like to draw houses, she said, especially ones with kitchens. Why kitchens? Because that's where people come together, she replied as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He smiled. It was true. His mother used to say the same thing. The heart of the home, she'd call it. He hadn't thought about that in years. Later that day, while sorting through a box of old linens in the storage room, the girl knocked over a stack of recipe cards tied with faded ribbon. They scattered across the floor, handwritten notes in looping cursive stained with tomato sauce and olive oil, some with little hearts or stars drawn beside favorite dishes. "Oh no," she gasped, scrambling to pick them up. "It's okay," the restaurant owner said, kneeling beside her. "They've been through worse." She held one up. "What's pappardelle al ragout?" "It's wide noodles with a slow-cooked meat sauce. My mother's Sunday special. Did people like it?" "Loved it," he said softly. "Said it tasted like home." She studied the card like it was treasure. "Can you still make it?" He hesitated. "I don't have the ingredients. Or the stove. Or customers. But you remember how?" He nodded. "Every step." She tucked the card into her pocket like a secret. Maybe someday. That afternoon, the man, still unnamed but now clearly trying to earn his keep, fixed the leaky faucet in the employee bathroom. He'd found an old wrench in the maintenance closet and worked with quiet focus, his hands steady despite the cold. When it was done, he tested it, and clean water flowed without a drip. "Used to fix engines," he said when the restaurant owner came in to check. "Cars, trucks, anything with parts. Hands learn how things fit together." "What happened?" the restaurant owner asked gently. The man wiped his hands on his pants. "Got hurt. Crushed vertebrae. Couldn't lift, couldn't stand long. Lost the job. Then the apartment. Been figuring it out since." He didn't say more, but the weight of those words hung in the air. The restaurant owner didn't push. He knew what it was like to lose everything and have no one to explain it to. That evening, the man cooked. Not much, just rice and canned beans he'd found in the back pantry, along with a few dried herbs the restaurant owner had forgotten about. But he moved with a rhythm that surprised them both. He toasted the rice first, added a pinch of cumin, stirred slowly, let it simmer with care. When he served it in chipped bowls, it smelled rich, comforting, like something made with love, not leftovers. The little girl took a bite and her eyes lit up. "Daddy, this tastes like Grandma's." The man looked down, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She taught me that trick." They ate in silence for a moment, the only sound the clink of spoons. Then the restaurant owner said, "You've got a good hand in the kitchen." The man shrugged. "Just feeding my girl. Nothing fancy, but it's good, really good." The man met his eyes then, and for the first time, there was something like hope in his gaze. Not big, not loud, just a small ember glowing under the ash. Over the next few days, a routine formed. The man cleaned, repaired what he could, and cooked simple meals from whatever they could scrounge. Pasta from old boxes, soup from vegetable scraps, even bread from a day-old loaf donated by the bakery down the street. The girl helped where she could, setting the table with mismatched plates, folding napkins into little fans, drawing new pictures every day and taping them to the fridge. The restaurant owner, instead of feeling like a host burdened by guests, began to feel like part of a strange makeshift family. He found himself looking forward to their quiet dinners, to the girls' questions. "Why do onions make you cry? Do chefs ever get tired of cooking?" To the way the man would hum old songs while washing dishes. One morning he woke to the sound of laughter. He followed it downstairs and found the girl standing on a stool, flour dusting her nose, rolling out dough with his mother's old rolling pin. The man was beside her, showing her how to shape it into circles. She wanted to make pizza, he explained, smiling. Said she missed cheese. They'd found a half-empty bag of shredded mozzarella in the walk-in freezer. Still good, thanks to the backup generator that ran on minimal power. They'd made a simple tomato sauce from canned tomatoes and garlic. It wasn't gourmet, but it was theirs. They ate it at the big family table near the kitchen, the one that used to seat 12. Now it held 3, but it felt full. Then on the 5th day, everything changed. A black sedan pulled up outside. A man in a dark coat stepped out, holding a clipboard. The restaurant owner's stomach dropped. He knew that look. City inspector. He went to the door before the man could knock. "Can I help you?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. The inspector flipped through papers. "Following up on this property. Bank flagged it for potential sale. Need to assess structural condition, utilities, occupancy status." The restaurant owner's throat tightened. "It's vacant, just me." I'm staying upstairs temporarily while I sort things out. The inspector raised an eyebrow. Mind if I take a look around? He couldn't say no. Not legally. So he stepped aside. The inspector walked through the dining room, tapping walls, checking outlets, peering into the kitchen. He didn't say much, but his eyes missed nothing. The clean floors, the repaired faucet, the faint smell of food. Then he stopped near the back staircase. You got others staying here? The restaurant owner's pulse jumped. No, just me. But at that exact moment, the little girl came down the stairs holding a drawing. She froze when she saw the stranger. The inspector looked from her to the restaurant owner. That your granddaughter? Before he could answer, the man appeared behind her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. We're just borrowing a room, he said quickly. Leaving today. The inspector's expression hardened. Unauthorized occupancy. That's a violation. This building's in foreclosure. You can't house people here. I know, the restaurant owner said, stepping forward. It was temporary. One night turned into a few because of the weather. They're leaving. The inspector wrote something on his clipboard. I'll note it. But if I come back and find anyone else here besides you, the bank will move faster on the sale, and you'll be out on the street too. After he left, the silence in the restaurant was heavy. The man turned to the restaurant owner, shame in his eyes. We'll go. Right now. Wait, the restaurant owner said. It's not your fault, but we put you at risk. You didn't. Life did. All of us. He walked to the window, watching the inspector's car disappear down the street. His mind raced. He couldn't let them leave, not into that cold, not with nowhere to go. But he also couldn't risk losing the one roof he had left. Then an idea began to form. Small at first, like a spark. What if... He started turning around. What if you stayed? But not as guests, as partners. The man frowned. Partners in what? This place is closed. What if it wasn't? The man stared at him. You're serious? I don't know how yet, the restaurant owner admitted. But you can cook. Really cook. And I know this place inside and out. Maybe we could try something new. Something smaller. Just enough to feed people, pay bills, stay off the street. The little girl tugged her father's sleeve. Could we really? He looked at her, then at the restaurant owner. We've got nothing. No money, no credit, no references. Neither do I, the restaurant owner said. But I've got a kitchen. And you've got talent. And she's got hope. He nodded at the girl. That's more than most people start with. The man was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, but only if we earn our keep. Every day, deal. That night they stayed. Not as charity cases, but as something new, something uncertain but alive with possibility. The next morning, the man woke before dawn. He cleaned the kitchen from top to bottom, scrubbing every surface, checking the gas lines, testing the ovens. The restaurant owner showed him the inventory, what was salvageable, what was expired. They made a list of what they'd need. Flour, oil, basic spices, maybe a few fresh vegetables. The girl drew a new sign. Coming soon. They didn't know what soon meant. Days, weeks, but for the first time in a long time, they had a direction. Later that day, while sweeping the sidewalk, the restaurant owner ran into Mrs. Chen from the flower shop next door. Heard you're thinking of reopening? She asked, arms crossed but eyes kind. Who told you that? Word gets around, she said with a small smile. And I saw the man fixing your sign yesterday. Looks like you've got help. We might, he said cautiously. She reached into her apron and pulled out a $20 bill for onions and garlic. My husband says your old sauce cured his homesickness. Don't let it disappear. He tried to refuse, but she pressed it into his hand. Take it. Pay it forward someday. That evening, as they sat around the table eating reheated rice and beans, the restaurant owner told them about Mrs. Chen's gift. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, people remember kindness, even when you think no one's watching. The little girl added, maybe the restaurant isn't broken. Maybe it just needed new people to love it. And in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the fragile promise of the future, the restaurant owner felt something he hadn't felt in months. Belief. Not in success. Not in money. But in the simple, stubborn power of trying again, with help, with heart, and with the quiet courage of two people who had nothing left to lose, but everything to give. The idea had taken root, but roots need water, sunlight, and time. Right now, all they had was hope and a few dollars from the flower shop owner. Still, something had shifted. The restaurant no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a workshop, a place where something new might be built from the pieces of what was lost. The man spent his days deep in the kitchen, not just cleaning, but studying. He opened cabinets, tested burners, ran water through the pipes. He asked questions, how the ventilation worked, where the gas lines connected, what kind of oven it was. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was clear he wasn't just guessing. He understood how things functioned, how heat moved, how flavors layered. The restaurant owner watched him work and began to wonder if this wasn't just a man who could cook a decent pot of beans, but someone who truly knew food. One afternoon, while sorting through the last of the dry goods in the pantry, the little girl knocked over a box labeled Grandma's Favorites. Out spilled not just more recipe cards, but a small cloth-bound notebook filled with handwritten notes, grocery lists, and little sketches of dishes. She picked it up carefully as if it were made of glass. "Can I look?" she asked. "Go ahead," the restaurant owner said. She sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through the pages. Her eyes widened. "She wrote stories about the food," she said, pointing to a note beside a recipe for stuffed peppers. "Made these for Tommy's birthday. He cried when he tasted them, said they reminded him of his mom, gone 5 years. Food heals more than hunger." The man knelt beside her. "Your mom wrote that?" The restaurant owner nodded. "She believed food was love you could taste." The girl looked up at him, then at her father. "Maybe we could make one of these, just to see." The man hesitated. "We don't have most of the ingredients, but we have some," the restaurant owner said. "And I know a guy at the market who might trade for cleaning help." So they chose a simple one, pappardelle with a slow-simmered tomato and herb sauce. The recipe called for fresh basil, good olive oil, San Marzano tomatoes, and wide egg noodles. They had none of those, except a small can of generic tomatoes, dried oregano, a single egg, and some flour. "We'll make it work," the man said. He cracked the egg into a bowl, added flour slowly, kneading with strong, sure hands until the dough came together. He rolled it out on the counter with the old wooden pin, then cut it into wide strips. It wasn't perfect, some pieces were thicker than others, but it was real. Made by hand, made with care. While the pasta dried, he heated a little oil in a pot, just enough to coat the bottom, and added a pinch of sugar to the canned tomatoes to cut the acidity. He stirred in garlic powder, all they had, a bay leaf someone had left behind, and a splash of red wine vinegar for depth. He let it bubble gently, tasting, adjusting, his brow furrowed in concentration. The restaurant owner watched from the doorway, arms crossed. He'd made this dish 1,000 times, but never like this, never with so little, yet so much intention. When the sauce was ready and the pasta boiled in salted water, they plated it on one of the few unchipped plates left. Steam rose in soft curls. The smell filled the kitchen, warm, earthy, comforting. They sat at the small table near the stove. The girl took a bite and closed her eyes. "It tastes like someone's hugging you," she said. The man smiled faintly. "That's the goal." The restaurant owner took his own bite. It wasn't his mother's version. It was different, rougher, simpler, but it had soul. And in that moment, he saw it clearly. This man didn't just cook to feed. He cooked to heal. "You've done this before," he said. The man nodded. "Before everything fell apart, I used to cook big Sunday dinners for my brothers, my cousins. Nothing fancy, stews, roasts, casseroles. But people came. They said it felt like home. Why'd you stop?" "After the injury. I couldn't stand long enough. And then we lost the apartment. No kitchen, no time, no energy." He looked at his daughter. "But for her, I always tried." The restaurant owner pushed his plate away, not because he was full, but because an idea was growing too big to ignore. "What if," he began slowly, "we opened just one night a week? A test night. Invite a few neighbors. Charge just enough to cover costs. See if people come." The man looked startled. "Just us with this kitchen? With no license, no health inspection, no nothing?" "We'd keep it small, quiet, word of mouth, like a supper club. But what if it fails? What if it doesn't?" The girl looked between them, eyes bright. "I could make place cards and draw menus." They talked late into the night, sketching plans on napkins. They'd call it Second Plate, a nod to second chances, second helpings, second lives. They'd serve one dish, family style, with bread and water, no frills. just honest food made with what they had. The next morning, the restaurant owner walked to the corner market. He offered to sweep, stock shelves, and organize the back room in exchange for a few key ingredients: real tomatoes, fresh garlic, a bunch of basil, and a bottle of decent olive oil. The grocer, an older man with tired eyes and a kind smile, listened quietly. "You're the one from Mama Rosa's, right?" he asked. "I was. I ate there on my wedding anniversary for 10 years straight. My wife loved your eggplant parmesan." The restaurant owner swallowed. "I'm trying to start something new." "With help." The grocer studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You've got a deal. But don't tell my wife I gave you the good olive oil. She'll think I've gone soft." Back at the restaurant, he handed the groceries to the man like they were gold. The man held the basil to his nose and closed his eyes. "Smells like summer." That week they prepared. The man practiced the sauce 3 times, tweaking at each go. Less salt, more herbs, a touch of red pepper flake for warmth. The restaurant owner scrubbed every inch of the dining room, polished the few good glasses they had, and hung string lights he'd found in a storage bin. The girl made a sign that read "Second plate, one night only," and taped it to the front window. They invited 10 people, neighbors, the flower shop owner, the grocer, a retired teacher who used to bring her book club every month. No social media, no ads, just quiet invitations, hand-delivered with a note. Food, company, no expectations. The night arrived. Snow had started again, light and quiet. At 6 o'clock, the first guest arrived, Mrs. Chen holding a small pot of chrysanthemums. "I brought these for your table," she said. For luck, others followed. The grocer came with his teenage son. The retired teacher brought her sister. By 7, all 10 seats were filled. The man stood in the kitchen, hands trembling slightly. The restaurant owner put a hand on his shoulder. "You've got this." In the dining room, candles flickered. The girl served water in mismatched glasses, her cheeks flushed with pride. When the food came out, steaming plates of pappardelle, crusty bread on wooden boards, the room fell silent for a moment. Then bite by bite, smiles spread. "This tastes like my Nana's kitchen," one woman said, eyes glistening. "I haven't had a meal this good in years," said another. The grocer's son, usually glued to his phone, looked up and said, "This is amazing, Dad. Who made it?" The grocer just nodded toward the kitchen. After dinner, no one left right away. They lingered, talking, laughing, sharing stories. Someone asked if they'd do it again. The restaurant owner looked at the man, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Next week," the restaurant owner said. "Same time." That night, after the last guest left and the dishes were washed, the 3 of them sat at the big table, exhausted but glowing. The girl yawned. "They liked it. They loved it," the restaurant owner said. The man stared at his hands. "I forgot what it felt like, to make something that matters." "You didn't forget," the restaurant owner said. "You just needed a kitchen." But the real surprise came the next morning. A woman knocked on the door, early before sunrise. She introduced herself as a writer who ran a local food blog. She'd heard about the dinner from the retired teacher. "I don't usually cover pop-ups," she said. But she said it was the most heartfelt meal she'd ever eaten. "Can I come next week?" They agreed nervously. Then 2 days later, a local news intern called asking if they'd be open that weekend. Word was spreading. The man panicked. "We're not ready for this. We don't have permits. We're not legal. We'll figure it out," the restaurant owner said, one step at a time. He called a lawyer he'd known years ago, a friend of a friend, who agreed to meet for coffee. Over bitter diner coffee, he explained their situation. No money, no license, but a kitchen, a cook, and a growing line of people who wanted to eat. The lawyer listened, then leaned forward. "There's a city program for community kitchens, temporary permits for food projects that serve the neighborhood, especially those helping vulnerable populations. If you frame it as a community effort, not a business, you might qualify." They applied that week. The man filled out forms with shaking hands. The girl drew a picture to include with the application. 3 people cooking together under a roof labeled home. While they waited, they kept cooking. Every Friday night, 10 guests. Then 15. Then 20. People brought their own chairs. Some paid double, saying, "Keep the change for ingredients." Then one afternoon, a man in a crisp white coat walked in unannounced. He introduced himself as a retired chef who'd owned a place downtown 20 years ago. He'd read the blog post. "I came to see if the hype was real," he said. "They fed him. He ate in silence. When he was done, he stood, wiped his mouth, and said, "You've got talent. Raw but real. If you're serious about this, I'll help you get it right. Knife skills, timing, plating. No charge." The man could barely speak. "Why would you do that?" The chef shrugged. "Because someone once gave me a chance when I had nothing but a dream and a dented pot." "Pay it forward." That night, as snow fell again outside, the three of them stood in the kitchen, looking at the empty chairs, the clean plates, the flickering candle still burning on the windowsill. The restaurant owner turned to the man. "This isn't just about staying off the streets anymore, is it?" The man shook his head. "No, it's about building something that lasts." And in that quiet kitchen filled with the scent of garlic and hope, they both knew this was only the beginning. The permit came through on a Tuesday. Just a single sheet of paper, stamped with the city seal, but to them it felt like a golden ticket. It wasn't a full restaurant license, not yet, but it was enough. Community Kitchen Pilot Program, it read. Valid for 6 months. Weekly inspections. Must serve at least 30% of meals at reduced or no cost. They read it over and over as if the words might vanish if they blinked. That same week, the food blogger published her piece. She didn't just write about the pasta. She wrote about the silence before the first bite, the way the little girl refilled water glasses without being asked, the quiet dignity in the cook's hands as he stirred the pot. She called it the meal that mended hearts. By morning, her inbox was flooded. People wanted to come, not just eat, be part of it. At first, they tried to keep things small, 20 seats, reservations only. But by the third Friday, there were 30 people waiting outside in the cold, breath fogging the air, holding handwritten notes that said, "Heard you're doing good work. Can I help?" Or "My daughter's birthday. She asked to eat here." They couldn't turn them away, so they moved the tables, pushed the dining room to its limits, borrowed folding chairs from the church down the street. The retired chef showed up early that night with a box of his old knives, a stack of clean aprons, and a list of local farms that might donate vegetables. "Start building relationships," he said. "Good food starts with good people." And then the donations began. It started with a bag of onions left at the back door, then a crate of eggs. A local bakery dropped off day-old sourdough with a note, "For your bread basket." Keep going. Someone donated a working espresso machine. Another brought a box of mismatched but beautiful vintage plates. "My grandmother's," the note read. She'd want them used, not stored. The flower shop owner organized a neighborhood cleanup day. 10 volunteers showed up with brooms, gloves, and thermoses of hot chocolate. They swept the sidewalk, washed the windows, even painted the front door a warm terracotta red, the same color the little girl had drawn in her picture weeks ago. Inside, the man cooked with a calm focus that surprised even himself. He wasn't just making food anymore, he was creating moments. He started adding small touches. A sprig of rosemary on each plate, a drizzle of infused oil, a handwritten note tucked under the bread basket that said, "You belong here." The restaurant owner handled everything else, scheduling, ordering what little they could afford, talking to health inspectors, answering emails that poured in from strangers saying, "This story gave me hope." He even started a small ledger, not for profit, but to track kindness. Mrs. G donated 5 lb as potatoes. Mr. T fixed the back door hinge. Teen group washed all windows. One afternoon, a young woman walked in holding a camera. She introduced herself as a student filmmaker working on a short documentary about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. She asked if she could film a night of service. They agreed on one condition: no faces of guests without permission, no sensationalizing, no savior narrative. "This isn't about us being heroes," the restaurant owner said. "It's about people helping people." She nodded. "That's the story I want to tell." The night she filmed, something magical happened. A regular guest, a quiet man who always sat alone, brought his guitar. After dinner, without being asked, he began to play. Soft folk songs, old hymns, simple melodies that filled the room like warmth. People stopped talking. Some closed their eyes. A few cried. The little girl sat at the edge of the stage, chin in hands, utterly still. Afterward, the man with the guitar said, "I haven't played in public since my wife passed. But tonight, it felt right." That clip ended up in the documentary. When it was posted online, it got thousands of views in a day. Comments poured in. "This is what community looks like." Made me call my dad. Where can I volunteer? Then came the real turning point. A local news station reached out. Not for a fluff piece, but for a full segment. They wanted to feature Second Plate as part of a series on grassroots recovery after hard times. The reporter came alone, no big crew, just a small camera and a notebook. She spent the whole day watching the man prep vegetables, the restaurant owner fix a wobbly table leg, the girl fold napkins into swans. During the interview, she asked the man, "What kept you going when everything was lost?" He looked at his daughter, then at the kitchen. Knowing someone might need what I could give, even if it was just a hot meal. The segment aired on a Sunday evening. By Monday morning, their voicemail was full. A retired accountant offered to do their books for free. A plumbing company said they'd fix the ancient dishwasher at cost. A group of high school students asked if they could earn service hours by washing dishes. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected place. A woman walked in one afternoon wearing a simple coat and no makeup. She didn't look like anyone important, just tired, kind-eyed, carrying a tote bag. She asked if she could speak to the owners. They sat at a corner table. She introduced herself as someone who worked with a national food nonprofit. She'd seen the documentary, read the news piece, and visited anonymously the week before. "I've been in this field for 20 years, she said. "I've seen a lot of feel-good projects come and go. But this feels different. It's not performative. It's real." She leaned forward. "We have a grant program for community kitchens that shows sustainability, heart, and impact. It's not huge, $25,000, but it could cover your first 6 months of licensed operation. Kitchen upgrades, maybe even a small stipend for staff." The restaurant owner and the man exchanged glances. $25,000 wasn't enough to buy the building, but it was enough to breathe. "We'd need to apply," she said, "but I'll help you write it. And if you get it, I'll connect you with mentors, suppliers, even a PR person who works pro bono for causes like yours." They applied that week. The little girl helped write the community impact section, dictating lines like, "We make people feel seen," and "Daddy says food is love with a spoon." While they waited, they kept going. Every Friday. Then they added Saturdays. The retired chef came twice a week now, teaching the man how to balance acidity, how to sear meat properly, how to taste with intention. Cooking isn't just following recipes, he'd say. It's listening to the food, to the people, to your gut. The man began creating his own dishes, blending the Italian foundation of the space with the southern comfort food he grew up with. Braised collard greens with garlic and lemon, cornbread croutons in tomato soup, peach cobbler with a hint of rosemary. Guests started calling it soul food with a hug. One night, a food critic from the city's main paper showed up. No warning, no reservation. He ate quietly in the back, left a generous tip, and vanished. 2 weeks later, his review ran on the front of the food section. Second Plate isn't just a meal, it's a reminder. In a world of noise and haste, here is a place that feeds your stomach and your spirit. The chef, who refuses to be called that, cooks like he's mending the world one plate at a time. Don't come for the ambiance, it's bare bones. Come for the humanity. Come because you believe, even a little, that kindness can be served on a plate. Reservations filled up for 2 months straight. But they didn't forget their roots. Every Tuesday and Thursday they opened the doors early for neighbors in need, no questions asked. The little girl stood at the entrance with a clipboard, not taking names, just counting meals. 23 today, she'd report proudly. One of those guests was an older woman who came every week. One day she pulled the restaurant owner aside. "My husband and I lost our home last year. Some days this meal is the only thing that gets me through. Thank you for seeing us." He didn't know what to say, so he just hugged her. As the weeks passed, something else changed. The man stood taller. He laughed more. He started making eye contact. He even signed up for physical therapy, using a sliding scale clinic, determined to strengthen his back so he could stand longer in the kitchen. The restaurant owner, meanwhile, found himself sleeping through the night for the first time in years. Not because everything was fixed, far from it, but because he wasn't alone anymore. They were in it together. Then, the email came. "Congratulations. Your grant application has been approved." They read it in the kitchen at dawn, the three of them huddled around the phone. The little girl jumped up and down. The man covered his face with his hands and took a deep, shuddering breath. The restaurant owner just stared at the screen, tears blurring the words. That evening, they celebrated with a simple meal: fresh pasta, roasted vegetables from the donated box, and a store-bought cake the grocer insisted on giving them. No fancy toasts, just quiet gratitude. Later, as they cleaned up, the man said, "I never thought I'd have a kitchen again, let alone one that matters." "You didn't just find a kitchen," the restaurant owner replied. "You gave it a new heart." Outside, the streetlights glowed. Inside, the dishwasher hummed, the oven cooled, and the little girl taped anew, drawing to the fridge, a building with a red door, smoke from the chimney, and 3 figures holding hands beneath it. At the bottom, in careful letters, she'd written, "This is home." And for the first time in a long time, it really was. 1 year to the day after the snowstorm that brought them together, the restaurant buzzed with a different kind of energy, not desperation, but celebration. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, the red door stood wide open to let in the spring air, and the sidewalk was lined with potted herbs donated by the flower shop. Inside, every table was full, not just with guests, but with people who had become part of the story. Neighbors, volunteers, former strangers who now greeted each other like old friends. The little girl, now 9, moved through the dining room with quiet confidence. She wasn't just the cook's daughter anymore. She was the restaurant's unofficial greeter, menu designer, and morale officer. She wore a small apron with a hand-stitched pocket that held her colored pencils, and she still left drawings on every table. A steaming bowl of pasta, a smiling sun, a trio of hands linked together. Tonight she carried a tray of water glasses, refilling them with care, pausing to whisper, "Enjoy your meal," to each guest. In the kitchen, the man moved with a rhythm that felt like music. His back still ached sometimes, but he'd learned to work with it, taking breaks when needed, using a stool to prep when standing too long, never pushing beyond his limits. He'd even started teaching a weekly cooking class for teens from the local shelter, showing them how to turn scraps into something nourishing. "Food isn't about fancy tools," he'd say. "It's about respect for the ingredients, for the people eating, for yourself." He plated the evening's special, hand-cut pappardelle with a rich ragout made from locally sourced beef, finished with fresh basil and a drizzle of garlic oil. Each plate was simple, but perfect. Not because it was flawless, but because it was made with intention. Up front, the restaurant owner stood near the host stand, watching it all. He wasn't behind the stove anymore, and that was okay. His role had shifted to organizer, connector, keeper of the vision. He handled permits, managed the small team of part-time staff, all formerly unhoused or recently unemployed, and made sure the community meal nights stayed sacred. Twice a week, anyone could walk in and eat for free or whatever they could spare. No questions, no judgment. A year ago, he'd been packing boxes in the dark, convinced his life's work was over. Now he watched a young man, once sleeping under a bridge, take orders with a steady voice and a warm smile. He saw an elderly woman laugh with her granddaughter over shared bread. He heard the low hum of conversation, the clink of cutlery, the occasional burst of laughter. This wasn't just a restaurant. It was a living room for the neighborhood. Later that evening, as the dinner rush slowed, a small group gathered near the kitchen for a quiet toast. The retired chef was there, along with the food blogger, the grocer, Mrs. Chen from the flower shop, and the nonprofit worker who'd helped them secure the grant. Even the city inspector who'd once threatened to shut them down stood in the back, holding a glass of sparkling water with a sheepish smile. "I came to see if you'd failed," he admitted. "Turns out you taught me something about what community really means." The restaurant owner raised his glass, just water, no alcohol, in keeping with their simple ethos. "To second chances," he said. "To showing up for each other even when it's hard. To believing that a hot meal can be more than food, it can be hope." They clinked glasses. The little girl slipped into the circle and added, "And to kitchens that become homes." After the guests left and the staff finished cleaning, the 3 of them sat at the big family table, the same one that had once held cold coffee and despair. Now it held 3 mugs of chamomile tea, a half-eaten slice of cake, and a stack of thank you notes collected from the night. The man leaned back, stretching his shoulders. "Hard to believe it's been a year. Feels like a lifetime," the restaurant owner said. "And also like it just started." The girl yawned, her eyes heavy. "I'm glad we stayed." They all were. A few weeks later, an unexpected letter arrived. It was thick, official-looking, with the logo of a national culinary foundation. The restaurant owner opened it with trembling hands. They'd been nominated for a humanitarian award, given to food businesses that use their platform to heal, uplift, and transform communities. The letter said their story had moved the judges deeply. Finalists would be flown to Chicago for the ceremony. At first, they didn't know what to do. Fly? To Chicago? It felt unreal. But the foundation covered all costs, and the retired chef insisted, "You have to go. Not for the award, for the message. Let people see that kindness works." So they went. In a grand ballroom filled with chefs in crisp whites and food celebrities with perfect hair, they stood out, wearing simple clothes, no makeup, no rehearsed speeches. When their names were called as finalists, the room erupted in applause. Not the polite kind, but the kind that starts in the chest and spills out loud and true. They didn't win the top prize, but it didn't matter. During the reception, chefs lined up to shake their hands. One famous restaurateur said, "I've got money, fame, Michelin stars, but I haven't fed a soul in years. You reminded me why I started." Back home, the nomination changed everything and nothing. The restaurant stayed the same, modest, warm, focused on people over profit. But now more volunteers came, more donations. A local college even started, offering internships at Second Plate for students studying social work and culinary arts. The man was invited to speak at a community forum about food insecurity. He stood at the podium, nervous at first, then found his voice. "I used to think needing help meant I was broken," he said. "But real strength isn't doing it alone. It's letting someone walk with you, and then turning around to walk with someone else." The restaurant owner, meanwhile, began mentoring other small business owners facing closure. "Don't give up the space," he'd tell them. "Give it a new purpose." And the little girl? She started a kids' kitchen on Saturday mornings, teaching children how to make simple, healthy meals. Her dream, she told her teacher, was to open a cooking school for kids who didn't have kitchens at home. One evening, as summer turned to fall, the 3 of them sat on the steps outside the restaurant after closing. The air was cool, the street quiet. Fireflies blinked in the nearby park. "I used to think my life was over when the doors closed," the restaurant owner said softly. "I thought mine was over when I lost my job," the man replied. "I thought mine was over when we slept in the alley," the girl added. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the stars appear one by one. Then the restaurant owner smiled. "Turns out we were all just waiting for each other." Inside, the kitchen light was still on, a habit they'd kept just in case someone needed a warm place to land. On the counter, a new drawing rested beside the coffee maker. It showed the restaurant, the red door wide open, people walking in from all directions. At the bottom, in careful letters, the girl had written, "Everyone belongs here." And in that simple truth, they'd found not just survival, but meaning. Not just a business, but a legacy. Not just shelter, but home. Years later, long after the news stories faded and the awards gathered dust, people would still talk about that little place with the red door. Not because the food was the fanciest in town, but because it was the truest. Because in a world that often felt cold and hurried, it was a place where you were seen, fed, and reminded, gently, consistently, that no one is ever truly alone. And that, more than anything, was the astonishing part.